Hi everyone, I'm Naomi. I know all kids love their mothers, but I really loved mine. She deserved all the love in the world and more. It was bewildering how kind she was. I believe she was sent to this world to show others how to be a good person. When she completed her mission, God called her back. She had cancer, but I didn't know it for a long time. My parents hid it from me. I thought she had been visiting my grandmother for a while, but she was in the hospital. One day, my dad picked me up from school and took me there. I was shocked to see my mom in bed. She looked so sick, and yet she was smiling. But she had a hard time speaking. I had to lean in very close to hear her. Naomi, my sweet girl, unfortunately, I won't be around much longer, but I'll keep loving you. Always remember that. I asked your dad to find someone else to marry because you're still so young. You need a loving family to grow up in. Please love your new mother. Be a happy family. That's how I'll be at peace. It's all I'm asking of you. This is how my mom said goodbye to me. She died a few days later. I was really sad, but I was also in a state of shock. A week earlier, I had my beloved mother with me, and now, when I was just 13, she was gone. It took me a while to believe it, but eventually I realized I had no choice but to accept this reality. One day, a few months later, my dad came up to me and said, "Naomi, we're going out for dinner. I'd like to introduce you to someone." He looked sheepish as he said it. He was looking at the floor. I couldn't help myself. "I don't want to meet anyone," I yelled. This time he looked at me. "Sweetie, I promised your mother that I would bring you up in a loving family." "That was your mom's last wish. Please understand me," he said. I nodded in desperation. He was right, since she had told me the same thing. That was the day I met Kora. She was my dad's friend from college. They weren't very close back then, but had reconnected through Facebook. She was divorced and had a daughter around my age who was living with her dad. That fact alone should have been enough to tell me that she wasn't a good person. How could a mother leave her daughter? How could she let her live in another home? I didn't think about that at first. In fact, I liked her. She seemed affectionate and interested in me. She asked me a ton of questions to get to know me. She was also really funny. I laughed so hard that night that my face hurt. On our way back home, my dad said, "You like her too, right?" I smiled and nodded. "You don't have to love her like your mom. Not that it's even possible. All I'm asking is that you give her a chance," he said. I don't know if he would have listened to me if I'd said I didn't like her, but I still regret being so positive about her. After that, things moved really quickly. They got married, and Kora moved in with us. Now I had a stepmother. Both my mom and my dad wanted me to love her, so I resolved to try my best, especially for my mom's sake. However, I quickly realized that this wasn't possible. Kora was like the evil stepmother in fairy tales. Every day I would discover something new I didn't like about her. For one thing, she was a control freak. She didn't want the door to my room to be closed. Whenever I closed it, she'd open it. Finally, she made my dad remove the door. The excuse was that the door had to be painted. It turned out that she was also really selfish. Her doctor told her to consume less salt or cut it out completely if possible. From that day on, she started cooking without salt. She wouldn't even allow us to have salt on the table. She said she'd be tempted to use it, and therefore we couldn't have any either. She also had weird obsessions. For example, she'd never use a public bathroom. She believed that she would get all sorts of diseases if she did. She wouldn't let me use them either because she said I'd be bringing the bacteria home if I did. A few times I had to pee so bad that I had to run home. One weekend, my stepmom's daughter Amy came to stay with us after my dad insisted. I was suspicious of her because of her mom, but I was wrong because Amy was nothing like her. It turned out that she was super cool and we had a great time. I think Kora didn't like that we got along because she kept on asking me to do chores while Amy and I were hanging out. For example, my dad always takes the trash out in the evening, but for the first time, she asked me to do it. "My dad will do it later," I said, but she mumbled something like, "Do it now so that it doesn't smell." This was just one example. There are so many other things. She made me water all the plants. She made me clean the bathroom after she took a shower. She made me go out to the store to buy batteries for the TV remote and stuff like that. We were surprised each time. Amy knew her mother much better than I did and said, "You never know what to expect from her. I'm sure she has her reasons, but only she knows what they are." My stepmother kept on treating me the same way in the following days. I didn't understand why. The only thing I could think of was that Amy and I got along. I thought she probably got jealous because she didn't get along with Amy, even though she's her mom. "You're going to make our bed in the mornings," she said, but I protested. "Why? I already make my own bed," I said. "You need to learn to do housework. You'll need these skills later," she said, clearly making up an excuse. She was now making me take out the trash every day too. Even though we had someone coming to clean the house twice a week, she still made me vacuum everywhere, dust the furniture, and clean the floors after school. I couldn't say no because she always came up with weird excuses and didn't stop talking until I did. Sometimes I'd do what she asked just to shut her up. These were acceptable to a certain degree. The last straw was when she told me to wash her car. "I won't wash your car. Who do you think I am, your personal maid? This is way too much," I yelled. She started crying right away. I didn't know how to react. This grown woman was crying like a baby. I ran to my room. If my room had a door, I would have slammed it. Kora cried nonstop for hours. When my dad came home, her eyes were swollen. He was surprised and asked what was wrong. "Nothing," she said, acting like she didn't want to tell him. My dad kept on asking, so she finally gave in and told him what was wrong. Apparently, I was treating her like an enemy since the day she moved in. I was being rude to her when she spoke to me. I was trying to come between her and my dad. I could clearly hear everything she said. She was making up all sorts of lies, but she put me in such a terrible position that if I told my dad that she was lying, it was as if I'd be confirming all that she was saying. My dad came into my room hours later. He just said, "I didn't expect this from you." My stepmom twisted everything, so denying it would have made me sound bad, so I didn't say anything. The next day, when I came back from school, my stepmother held out the keys to her car, smiling. "Wash my car if you don't want to disappoint your dad again," she said. I did it, but I was so angry that I cried. I didn't want her to make up new lies to my dad. As I was washing the car, I got an idea. If I logged into her social media accounts, would I find something in her messages that would help me? After washing the car, I took out the trash, cleaned the bathroom, and took out the laundry from the washing machine. After a bunch of other chores, I went to my room and called Amy right away. I told her what was going on. "I need your help," I said. She said she'd be happy to help. "Do you know your mom's Facebook password? Any guesses?" I asked. "If she's still using the same password, it's the first 2 letters of our dog's name and her old car's license plate number," she said. She spelled it out, and I wrote it down. I was shaking with anxiety. I opened my laptop and entered my stepmother's email address and the password that Amy guessed, but it didn't work. Then I had another idea. I ran out and checked the license plate number of the car I had just washed. I came back and entered the new number. Bingo! I was in my stepmother's Facebook. I quickly opened her messages. There was a long conversation between her and her sister where she described in detail all the things she made me do, everything she told my dad, and how she manipulated all of us. These messages were enough to show who she really was. There was also a message from her ex-husband. Her ex, who is Amy's dad, had written, "Start living an honest life. If you get caught again, I won't do anything to help you out this time." He was a lawyer, so Kora must have been involved in some criminal behavior. I didn't know what it was, though. You can guess what happened afterwards. When my dad came home, I called him to my room. I know it was wrong, but I had no other choice. "You need to read Kora's messages on Facebook," I said. My dad sat calmly and read through everything. He didn't say anything. He just took down some notes and made screenshots. Then he kissed me on my forehead and left. A while later, I heard the front door close. I guess my dad didn't want to have this conversation at home. He and Kora went out. When I went to bed, they still weren't back. When I woke up, Kora wasn't at home. While I was at school, she packed her stuff and left. I never saw her again. "Naomi, this was all my fault. I'm really sorry. I think we dodged a bullet." I talked to Kora's ex-husband. Turns out she really is a psycho. Terrible things could have happened to both of us. Thankfully, she can no longer hurt us. "We'll get through this together," he said. Since then, my dad and I have been living happily in our home with my amazing mother in our thoughts.
Hi guys, my name is Adam. I'm 14 years old. My parents are doctors. My sister is 3 years older than me. We're a happy family. We have lots of fun together. We always look on the bright side of every situation. Unfortunately, something very upsetting happened recently. It made me realize that you can grow up and mature in a matter of days. My uncle and his family live in another city. They visit us once or twice a year, always bringing us gifts when they come. During their last visit, they brought us a box of chocolates that they had bought in Belgium. We finally understood why Belgian chocolate is so famous. They were all so delicious, so we ate a little too much. My mom had to take the box away from us. If they're that good, don't finish them all in one sitting. You can only have one per day, and I'll give them to you, she said. We weren't happy, but she was the boss, and we knew that she wasn't going to back down. The next day, when my parents were at work, we remembered the chocolates. Not that we ever stopped thinking about them. Where could my mom have hidden them? If we managed to find them, she'd be angry, but we also knew that it wouldn't be long before she forgave us. So we started looking for the chocolates, but we couldn't find the box anywhere. It looked like my mom was really serious about hiding it. We started looking in the least likely spots. When we were searching through my dad's desk, we found a key that looked really old. There was a wooden box in his room. My dad had worked at a hospital in Afghanistan at some point. We knew that my parents were often writing to each other then. All the letters were inside that box. Could my mom have hidden the chocolates there? We opened the box with the key. And bingo! We were so happy and started eating right away. Meanwhile, my sister started jokingly reading a letter that my dad had written. My beloved, the days are short, but the months don't seem to end. I have missed you so much. So I started going through the box to find a letter from my mom to read as a response. I came across a folder. I showed it to my sister and read what it said on it. Child Protection Services, Adoption Department. We looked at each other in confusion. Would we be crossing the line if we opened the folder? But we couldn't stop. My mom came in just as we were about to open the folder. But she didn't say anything. She just gulped. In a very calm voice, "Go to your rooms, both of you," she said. We didn't look inside. I know what we did was wrong, but aren't you going to tell us what's going on? My sister asked. My mom didn't even look and just showed us the door. I said, "Go to your rooms." We left without saying another word. We had kind of figured it out. When I went to my room, I immediately Googled Child Protection Services Adoption Department. Just as I thought, these documents were about adoption. I texted my sister the link. She replied with another link about the same subject. She was also trying to find answers online. My dad came home soon after. We didn't know what was going on, but the house was very tense. We were waiting anxiously in our rooms. I heard my mom call my sister. Then I heard the front door close. Where could they have gone? I was so curious. Just then my dad came in. He said my mom and sister went out for a walk. He was being really quiet as if he didn't know where to begin. A few times he cleared his throat, but still didn't manage to say anything. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Adam, I want this to stay between us, at least for a while," he said. I was getting more and more nervous. I didn't want to hear the rest. Why couldn't they have told me I was adopted? Didn't they think that it would come out eventually? Tears started falling from my eyes. I wasn't crying. I just couldn't stop the tears from falling. My dad looked at me. "Adam, it's time you learned the truth, but promise me that you won't tell your sister that she is adopted. This is really important. Deal?" he said. Wait a minute. It's my sister who was adopted? I looked at him in shock. I should have been happy because I'd felt so sad when I thought that it was me, but it was my sister who was adopted. That idea was so painful. This meant that my sister wasn't my real sister, right? She would be so sad if she found out that I wasn't her real brother. Of course, I couldn't tell her this. Even if my dad told me to tell her, I would keep this a secret forever. I couldn't bear making her sad. The next few days were very difficult. It was as if my sister and I had made a pact not to mention that day again. But I could see that the love between us was even stronger now. She was coming to my room a lot, making all these weird faces to make me laugh. I knew that whether or not she was my biological sister, she was my real sister. In fact, I started to love her even more after finding out that she was adopted. People naturally love their siblings, but loving someone you're not related to is so much more meaningful. Don't you agree? Pretty soon, we were as happy as we used to be. I had already forgotten about what had happened. In fact, I was planning on saying to my dad, "Let's tell my sister everything. It really doesn't matter that she's adopted. I love her more than a biological sister." Just around that time, my dad came into my room. "We think that your sister should learn the truth. However, we have a favor to ask you. We'll talk to her, but first we wondered if you'd like to write her a letter, telling her how you feel." Normally, this would be something I would refuse, but I was happy to do it. Yet, I realized that writing such a letter was a lot more difficult than I expected. Yes, from my perspective, nothing had changed, but what was my sister going to think when she found out that she was adopted? How could I explain this without hurting her? I thought about it for days. I'd start and erase it over and over. I didn't even have the first sentence. Then I had an idea. If she was adopted, for how long had she been my sister? I mean, was she here when I was born? Or did she come after me? I tried to remember our oldest memory to figure this out. There were so many memories from the time when I was a toddler, but which one was the oldest? I decided that the one that I barely remembered must have been the oldest. In this memory, we're somewhere where there are a lot of kids. We are running towards something. I don't know where this was. Like I said, I barely remember it. I trip on something and fall. Only one of the kids stops. The one who stops is, of course, my sister. She helps me up, checks if my knees are scraped, and then picks me up. Then we start running towards the other kids. I started my letter with this memory. "You've been my sister all this time, and you'll always be my sister," I continued. "Not having the same mother does not weaken our bond, but only makes it stronger." I started crying, telling her how much I loved her, how I'll always love her, and that nothing will change that. Every word I wrote was true. I just wrote whatever I was feeling. Finally, the big day arrived. My dad texted me during the day asking, "Is your letter ready?" When I said that it was, "You can give it to her tonight," he said. It wasn't tense at home anymore. It was like we were all finally relaxed and in a really good mood. When my dad signaled me with his eyes, I knew it was time. "Let's meet in my office," he said. My sister was there when I entered. The wooden box that started it all was on the desk. My parents were smiling. I had put the letter in an envelope. I gave it to my sister. She was shocked. She gave me a piece of paper too. When I opened it, I saw that it was a letter that started with, "My dear Adam." I was so confused. Why did she write me a letter? We went to opposite corners of the room to read. I couldn't believe my eyes. My sister was saying that I was adopted. Just like me, she had written about how much she loved me and that whether or not I was her biological brother made no difference to her. After reading, we first looked at each other and then to our parents. My dad took out the adoption papers from the box and told us to come closer. He showed us the folder. Yes, we were both adopted. It wasn't just my sister. I was adopted too. My sister and I looked at each other. We couldn't help it and started laughing. There was no distinction between us. We were in the same boat. We shared the same fate. We hugged each other. Then my parents joined in. The four of us hugged for a while. Then we went to dinner. My parents apologized for keeping this a secret. They said they were going to tell us when the time was right, but that the chocolates had accelerated the process. When the whole thing began, my mom called a psychiatrist that she works with. She said this wasn't her specialty and asked the child psychologist to help out. That's how this idea of letters came up. My parents thought it was a good plan, so they took action. Well, you know the rest. We learned something else that day too. My parents had intended to only adopt my sister. They didn't know about me. But my sister didn't want to leave me behind. She threw herself on the floor crying, "He is my brother. I won't leave Adam here," she kept saying. Apparently, she named me Adam. We're not sure, but we think that it's a name from her biological family. My parents caved in and decided to adopt us both. As you can see, we were really siblings from the beginning. Thank you for listening to me. If you want to share something that happened to you and that really affected you, send an email to the address in the info section. Bye.